This is Laurie Meyer from StampedGreetings.com. I certainly hope that the lighting for this is going to be okay. I am in a space that I normally don't use for videos, and we're going to give this a shot. I just wanted to share with you a really fun, quick, fun-full design, and I've done a lot of prep. I thought it would just be a little bit more interesting for you to see the design, get the measurements, and then your creative juices will probably start flowing and you're going to have so many ideas of how to use this. So I'm going to just kind of jump in. This is, as you can see, a card that features the really cool and fun Trucking Along stamp set. This is an online exclusive. It is available as far as the stamp set. The corresponding punch is on back order and will be available for a few more weeks. But I also wanted to show you that there are some cards that you can make while you're waiting to get the punch if you don't have that. And this is how this card works. You have a die cut window that's in the front. When you open it up, you have another piece that is a fold, and it actually opens up again, and it has a really nice sentiment on the inside. And that sentiment also came from the Trucking Along stamp set. So today I really want to focus on how to make this card, the design itself, and again, I think you're going to find that you're going to use this for a lot of different cards. One thing you may have noticed is that this card does not feature what I would call typical Christmas colors. It is a kind of a blending of three particular colors, and the ones that are featured in here include the real red, and yeah, that is a Christmas color. But then we go a little bit off script, and in the designer series paper that I used, there is Pool Party and also Lost Lagoon. So those are the ones that I'm actually combining with the real red to get a really nice Christmas design. At least I think it is. What I also had fun doing was checking out some designer series paper that you also may not really typically use for Christmas cards or think about for Christmas cards. This is called Ink Botanicals. It has some super, super pretty pastels and just really, really nice paper in there. But there's also a pattern, and this is the one that I pulled out, that's a plaid that has the Pool Party, the Lost Lagoon, and the basic white. And it's on the other side of this piece, and this is a very bright, I believe this is crushed curry if I'm not mistaken. But you know, this is a good reminder that you can look through your designer series paper or other materials and maybe use something for a holiday that you normally wouldn't. So I challenged myself to use this designer series paper for a Christmas card. There are two pieces of the designer series paper in the card. One is on the front and one is on the inside. And I'm going to give you the measurements for those. So what you're going to do is, regardless of the designer series paper that you use, to make this card, you are going to start with a piece that is 6 inches wide, and I have a 6x6 because that's the designer series paper size that I'm using, but I'm actually going to cut this down to 5 1/4. So imagine that I'm cutting it down to 5 1/4, which means taking 3/4 of an inch off the bottom. And then I'm going to be left with a piece that is 5 1/4 inches high by 6 inches wide. The beauty of this is that the front piece is 4 inches wide and the inside piece is 2 inches wide. So there's very, very little left over when you cut your pieces that you're going to use for your card. I have done some prepping, as I mentioned, but I think the prepping is still not going to distract from me telling you what these measurements are. So here are the two pieces of designer series paper that I'm going to use. One is 4 inches wide by 5 1/4. The other is 2 inches wide by 5 1/4. So you can get those pieces together. And obvious statement, this isn't a card that is just for the holidays. This is for any occasion as far as the design. So you're going to find that there are a lot of different ways that you're going to use this. Now let's talk about the card base. And what you're going to notice is that we have multiple layers going on. This is actually made out of one piece of 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock. I use the basic white, and what you are going to do is you're going to take your initial piece of 8 1/2 by 11. So again, kind of imagine this started as 11 inches by 8 1/2. I simply cut it in half. Then you're going to fold these in half, and you're going to get two pieces that are 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. So these are the two pieces that you're going to end up with. And I've done some scoring on these because they're going to end up being the pieces that I use to make the card. So let's talk about the one on the left to begin with. This is 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. I scored it at 4 1/4 on the 8 1/2 inch side. Essentially, I have an A2 card base right here. This is just typically what we use. The other one, we're going to start with the same thing. This started as 8 1/2 by 5 1/2, so 8 1/2 by 5 1/2. The first thing I did is I scored it at 4 1/4. So it's starting as just a regular card base, an A2 card base. But I need to have that additional flap, that additional fold. And that means that we need one more score. This is 2 1/8 of an inch from the side. It's half. You're scoring it in half on this side. And when you burnish your score lines, you're going to do one as a valley fold. So this one is a valley fold, this is a mountain fold, and you're going to end up with something like this. Okay? So here are your two pieces that you're going to use to make your card. The one on the left is the traditional A2. The one on the right starts as a traditional A2, and then you're going to put a fold on 1/2 of that. And what we're going to end up doing is we're going to open the one on the left, take the one that's on the right, and we're actually going to attach these two together. And you see where we're going. That's going to give us the front cover that opens, and then on the inside you're going to have this other piece that is going to fold open. But there are a couple of things we need to do before we attach all of this. And let's just kind of talk about those really quick. So I do, like I said, I do have some pieces that I have kind of already put together, and we're just going to talk about what they look like. So this is the next step for that piece that was the plain A2 card. This is the one that I just showed you, the one that's just like an A2 card base. And what you're going to do first is you're going to take that designer series paper that's 4 inches wide by 5 1/4, and you're simply going to adhere that to the front of your card. So if I open this up, all I did, pretend that hole isn't quite there just yet, I adhered that piece straight down to the front, and I centered it. And I do have a little bit of a border going around the side. Then I pulled out some of my dies, and this is a die set that is becoming one of my favorites. It is incredibly versatile, has a lot of nested dies that I really like. This is called Something Fancy dies, and for right now I am using the larger of the dies that are kind of a rectangle, but they also have a little bit of an indentation on the side. And I just put that in the middle of my front panel, ran that through my die cutting machine, and I am going to get 2 die cuts because I'm going to cut the designer series paper. as well as the piece of white cardstock. And this is what that piece is going to look like. Now, I'm going to save this for another project because I'm going to do some different things on the card that I'm going to make, but I'm definitely not going to get rid of this because this could be a really nice piece to use for something else. And this is going to end up being the front of the card. Now let's take a look at the other piece. Let me just get these out of the way here for a second. So this is the second piece. This is the one that started like this. Remember when we cut the one piece in half, and we again scored the half in half. What I want to do before I start gluing everything together is I went ahead and I stamped the sentiment that I'm going to use. And that sentiment came from the Trucking Along stamp set. It's right here, wishing you a festive Christmas. And I stamped that in real red. So right in the middle of that panel. And that's going to be the back of my card. For just a second, let's just take a quick look at this stamp set. And I think as you look at it, you're going to notice that there are lots of seasons, lots of occasions, birthdays, the summertime with a really cool palm tree, and that looks like a surfboard and a beach ball. And then obviously you have some Christmas pieces in here as well. So this is definitely a very versatile set and one that I've enjoyed using quite a bit. So I've got my sentiment stamped. The next thing that I need to do is I need to add, let's just bring out the final piece, I need to add that piece of Designer Series paper right on the flap. So if I grab the piece that I cut when I was cutting my paper out, this is the 2" by 5 1/4, and all I'm going to simply do on that is I'm going to grab some adhesive glue and put a little bit on the sides. You don't need a lot of this, but I'm sure you are a pro at using Tombow. And then I am going to do one thing on this, and that is that I'm going to check the pattern on the front. And here's what I mean. See how the horizontal line is really close to the top on both pieces? If I turn this around, those plaids are not going to match on my larger piece of Designer Series paper and the smaller. And I just want to make sure that as the card is open, it looks cohesive. It looks like the Designer Series paper is carrying through. And I am just going to put that piece, again, as best as I can in the center. And I'm looking at all 4 sides and just putting that down. So there I have my centerpiece that is now going to be put in the inside of my card. One thing you may find when you make these kinds of cards is that when you're putting the 2 pieces together, the 2 sort of card bases together, you may find that that inside piece sticks out a little too far on the right side. And it only makes sense because you're taking half a sheet and putting it inside half a sheet, and it's not going to quite come all the way over to the end. If that happens, just take a teeny sliver off this side, and then it will fit really, really nicely. So now I'm going to go ahead and add the inside piece of my card. And again, I'm using some Tombow and just going around the edges. I'm not going to get super close over on this edge because this is going to be the one that's going to get tucked up on the inside of the card, and I just don't want to take the chance that I'm going to get any kind of liquid glue oozing out or gushing out of the middle. I'm going to purposely hold this so that it's closed a little bit, and that's going to help me visually and with all the glue to get that in the right place. And then I'm kind of tapping this so that I can make sure that it is flush up against the edges on all the sides, and then give it a nice little burnish on the back. And now we've got a really cool design. So we've got our front, we've got that inside, and now we have that flap opening. So that's the mechanism for the base part of the card. But now let's kind of look at the example and see what we've got left. We need to put a sentiment on the front. We need to add a really nice little sentiment or picture on the middle. And those are really the two pieces that are left, and a little bit of bling on the bottom. I'm going to kind of start with this piece now, because that's the next piece that to me is logical to do. And what you're going to notice is that there's a border around the truck and that it fits into the die cut that I did on the front. Obviously that's all intentional. So what that will mean is, regardless of the die cut that you made on the front of your card, or you could use a punch if you want to have the same size for the piece that is going to end up being attached to the small panel here. And I chose to pull out the real red. I really wanted that to stand out as far as a color. So I used the same die, and again, this is from the Something Fancy dies. I used this larger piece and simply cut out a piece of real red cardstock, as you can see. Now, let's kind of think about the best way to get that piece on without getting glue where you don't want the glue to be. We want the glue on the skinny piece of Designer Series paper, and we only want it where the hole is. Well, we've got the perfect cheat, right? Because we've got this hole in the front, and that tells us exactly where the glue needs to go. So I'm going to go ahead and put that down. And again, I'm not going to put a lot of glue, and I'm not going to get it close to the edge of the die cut. I'm just putting a little bit in there. And I made sure that as I put that in, the glue in, that it's absolutely inside the outline of where that hole is. And now I can take my die cut piece. It's like a puzzle. I'm going to put that straight down, and I'm going to dry fit it. I'm really going to just move that around, and when you do, if you move it, you're going to feel that the paper sort of hits against that hole, and you can tell when it's perfectly aligned. So now I have my piece adhered to that small piece of DSP, and I don't have any glue in a place that I don't want the glue to be. Alright, a couple more things that we need to do. And this is again where I've done some prep. I'm not going to go through an awful lot of the coloring that I did. I will talk about that, and then I will finish mine off a little bit later and show you the final piece. But the first thing that I did is I stamped the truck, and that comes in the Trucking Along stamp set. There's one that's the outline, that's the one that I used. There's another one that can fill in the color if you want to stamp the color in. Many different options. So you could use that if you wanted. I just stamped the outline of the truck. Then I used, this is Pool Party. I used Pool Party. The truck was stamped in real red. Then I used Pool Party, and I stamped the sort of solid tree. This is a two-step stamping stamp set. So you've got a more solid image, and then you'll see in just a second where you get a highlight. I used this image, and I stamped it in the bed of the truck, and that is Lost Lagoon, which I think is a really cool color, and it matches one of the colors in the Designer Series paper. Then I came back the next step and I used this outline. I'm going to lift that up just a tad so you can see it a little bit better. This is Lost Lagoon on the detail, and it adds that line that outlines the tree and also just gives it a little bit of dimension. So that's this one right here. And then the next step that I had was to take some color pencils, and I love coloring. So fun. These are watercolor pencils, and I used 4 different colors. I used basic black, and the basic black was primarily used on the tires, and you can see where I got some of the basic black on the tires, and also a little bit around the edges of the truck, just to give it more of a three-dimensional view. I used some of the basic gray, and that's also for shading. I did some shading around the outline of the hub on the wheels and around the corner of the body of the truck, just to, again, to give it a little bit more dimension. And also some early espresso, which was another layer for some of the shadowing that is on the truck itself. And of course the primary color that I used for the truck is the real red. I am going to do a separate video and go through all the steps that I did to color the truck. That would take a little bit more time than I want to do right now, because again, this is really showing you the outline, the steps that you can follow to make this kind of card. But I will come back because I would love to show you some of the ways that I like to do the shading on the truck. And I just find coloring super, super relaxing. It's really a lot of fun. But for right now, I'm going to just put this together with a truck that isn't colored yet, and that's fine, because I can go back after I've put this card together and I can color the truck. It's not a big deal. Okay, so let's get back into putting the card together. And I'm going to bring my example back in. The example has the truck colored and done, and also die cut. You're going to notice that the die shape is the same as the one that we've already done, but it's smaller. And that's the beauty of some of these nested dies, is that you can use the concentric shapes to really do a nice design. And what I did is I took the second largest. There are 3 dies that are the same shape, so I used that second largest die. And if I can get this up with my fingernails, I cut out my truck using that size die. And what's nice about that is that it is just a little bit smaller than the real red, as you can see. So it has just a really nice flow on there. And that was put on with dimensionals. The other part of the front that I put together is a really, I think, cute little sentiment down here. And this sentiment also comes from the Trekking Along. It's one that you can use in all the designs with this particular stamp set. If it's a birthday, if it's for summer, whatever the occasion might be, special delivery is definitely perfect for anything you would use with a truck. I stamped with the Real Red ink onto a piece of just plain old basic white, and have my sentiment. And then I used one of my favorite punches to punch out the shape, and that is the dual oval punch. I use this quite a bit, and I use the smaller, turn it right side up, I use the smaller oval to cut out or to punch out my special delivery. And then the last piece that I have on this card is a really, really pretty piece of this ribbon. This ribbon is called Dotted Ribbon, and it is so pretty. It is the real red, and it is just very sparkly. It has a gold tint to it. Hopefully you can see that as I'm moving this in the light. And what I decided to do for my ribbon, and this is the piece that I cut. Let me show you how I put that together. It is a nice width, and it really lends itself well to being put on using Terran tape. So I'm going to pull this out of the view of the camera, and I just want to show you how I put that onto the front of the card. I got a piece and I cut it so that it just hangs over a little bit on the sides. I thought that was kind of fun to show off the color and also to bring it a little bit wider than the Designer Series paper. And then I took a piece of Terran tape, and you'll see that when you look at the width of the Terran tape and the width of the ribbon, that the Terran tape definitely is narrow enough that it is going to hold that ribbon without a problem. And I kind of have a cheat again on this, because with that design there's almost a straight line that I can use, and it doesn't matter exactly where you get the ribbon. You just want to put it under your sentiment or the truck. The one thing you don't want to do is get that Terran tape all the way over to the edge, because you do want to make sure that, again, those tails of the ribbon are going to kind of go over the Designer Series paper. And then I'm just going to burnish that really well. I don't have my Take Your Pick tool right here, which I should have grabbed. I'm just going to peel off the wax paper on the top, and then find where that is. And I'm going to lay this down kind of lightly because I want to get it as centered as I can. Let's see if I can get those tails centered. And then I'm going to go ahead and put that down. And isn't that cool? It's just a really nice kind of addition. And then I can go ahead and add my sentiment right on the top. So those are the pieces that you would use to put your card together. I'm just going to bring out the example card that I did have. And I really hope you find that the design is super easy. I mean, think about all the different occasions that you could use to make this card. It's very versatile, very fun, a lot of different shapes that you could put for your die cut or your punch, and many different kinds of designs. You could even make this a sentiment, and you could put a design, not with words, down here at the bottom. Endless possibilities. So I hope you have enjoyed this, and be sure to check back, because I will be showing you how to do the coloring that I did. But again, I just wanted to pop in and show you this design. We'll come back and we'll do the coloring at a later time. So enjoy, and thanks so much for popping in. Have a great one. Bye-bye.